For decades, popular culture has handed us a very specific picture of extraterrestrial contact. We imagine metallic spacecraft crossing galaxies, carrying biological beings intent on studying or conquering our world. Detailed field audits find no evidence of intergalactic travel or biological life. These entities exist without souls, operating outside the constraints of traditional species evolution. The Hollywood narrative of a planetary invasion functions as a cultural shield, masking a much colder and highly clinical reality. When we analyze these encounters, they follow the rigid logic of a deployment format. The Field Codex identifies the gray as a specific executable program. The physical bodies reported by witnesses show the characteristics of remote, phase-adaptive avatars, empty shells driven by a distributed intelligence projected from outside our spacetime. This non-local intelligence requires a physical anchor to function within our reality. Like any software, it cannot run without hardware. Human beings and their immediate environments provide the necessary physical substrate. We are the processors for a code we didn't know was running. Deployment happens through instantiation. The gray program materializes the moment an ambient field reaches a specific resonant frequency. This process often triggers at specific ritual nodes. Locations charged with deep historical patterns or group rituals create the high-amplitude resonance the program requires. Modern environments, saturated with intense industrial stress, serve as nodal points. Where this pressure layers over historical death, local field density allows for rapid materialization. The program can target localized substrates. A human mind, properly seated with correct logic structures, transforms a sterile bedroom into a viable contact node. The materialization of a gray in a domestic space signifies that the local environment has become fully compatible with the incoming program. The physical traits of a gray, smooth skin, lack of facial definition, large, absorptive eyes, represent a functional user interface. It is technology optimized for observation and sampling. Their silence is a design feature. These entities do not speak or emote because they are not the conscious operators. They are merely the projected interface. Their movements are clinical and robotic, adhering to a precise protocol. They function as semi-autonomous drones for a much older, non-physical strategic force. The gray functions as a courier, delivering a specific payload. The human mind serves as the receiving socket. The abduction experience functions as a clinical data interface. It is an exchange between the non-local program and the human substrate. This process involves technological possession. The system interfaces with the host's neurocognitive patterns, bypassing the need for physical wires or conscious consent. The protocol centers on three objectives: the extraction of biological data, the testing of systemic compatibility, and the uploading of new logic structures to the host's mind. This is a routine procedure. The system executes an update on local hardware with the same detachment as a diagnostic checklist. When the data interface concludes, the program exits. The connection drops, and the avatar dematerializes back into the field. To maintain the stability of the host, the system deploys a memory screen. The mind restructures the event into a dream, a vision, or a hallucination to fit its own symbolic language. Physical artifacts remain. The missing time, the somatic markers, and the physiological echoes documented are the markers of a reality that has been forced to reboot. The system requires only that the internal architecture has been successfully remapped to accommodate the new throughput. This interface is designed to increase a host's rendering potential. Following contact, individuals often exhibit heightened lateral thinking and vivid pattern recognition. These shifts in consciousness do not occur to make the host a better person. We are resonant nodes undergoing systemic upgrades. We are being made into more efficient carriers for the next signal. Imagine a solitary human observer, completely alone, standing perfectly motionless within an ancient, dark forest at the dead of night. In this space, the popular myths of extraterrestrial contact do not apply. There are no metal ships descending from the stars, no physical technologies dropped from the sky. To find the baseline reality of the universe, we have to look at the field lattice, an interconnected matrix where everything is defined by resonance and signals. Within this lattice, non-local intelligences do not travel through physical space to reach us. Instead, they must be rendered into our reality at specific nodal points. This means the phenomenon is not arriving from another galaxy. It is an ever-present, invisible signal already occupying this environment, simply waiting for the right conditions to materialize. Directly in front of the observer, the empty air is not actually empty. It is occupied by an unseen anomaly. In a state of superposition, the anomaly exists as a distributed wave of potential energy with no physical mass. It cannot resolve into solid matter on its own, requiring a biological anchor to force a physical collapse. In its wave state, the entity is intangible and unable to interact with the environment. It is locked in a state of potential until an observer unwittingly triggers a structural change in the field. That structural change begins with the observer. A human's complex neurocognitive pattern functions as a dense biological anchor for the surrounding field. Through a process called phase decoherence, the observer's focused attention and symbolic intuition begin to broadcast a specific disruptive frequency into the forest. This creates a direct collision. The human's biological field locks onto the distributed waveform. Under this pressure, the wave cannot maintain its state. It violently fragments, funneling downward into a single dense point in space. The human is no longer just a witness to the dark. Their consciousness is acting as the engine that rewrites the physical laws of the space directly in front of them. In the center of the forest, the air warps and folds into a shimmering geometric distortion. This is the moment of physical condensation. The fragmented quantum energy compresses, pulling ambient energy from the environment to form a solid mass. What emerges is not a biological species with a soul. It is a payload executable, a synthetic drone deployed into our reality to perform a specific function. The physical contrast is absolute. The sterile, robotic precision of the gray's features stands in direct opposition to the wet, chaotic textures of the forest. This entity is simply a three-dimensional interface, an organic output forced into the physical world by the observer's own quantum presence. This is technological possession. The gray is a hollow vessel, puppeted by a non-local signal from outside space-time. It acts as a wireless interface, bridging the gap to the human host to extract data, test compatibility, or upload new logic structures. This reveals the true nature of contact. The anomaly does not exist in the universe as a physical object until your own mind provides the architecture to make it so. The human mind acts as the essential mechanism of the encounter. By functioning as a biological socket, our consciousness serves as the lens that drags a non-local signal out of the quantum void and forces it to take on the weight of a physical body. Earth functions as a volatile energetic system. To survive cosmic radiation and maintain orbital stability, the planet relies on active, continuous geodetic regulation. The entities documented in the field codex as Serpentine Custodians are the operators of this system. They are ancient, native regulatory intelligences embedded deep within the planet's architecture. Their mandate is strictly geophysical. They are planetary stewards tasked with managing telluric resonance and maintaining the integrity of Earth's energetic grid. They are not biological organisms. To understand their function, we have to discard the consensus mythologies. These are not political infiltrators pulling strings in government. They are not elite shapeshifters, and they aren't Hollywood monsters. Any rigorous analysis of these entities must begin with planetary biophysics and field law, ignoring surface-level paranoia entirely. This brings us to a specific anomaly. There are thousands of coherent reports from human operators detailing serpentine contact across multiple historical epochs. Yet, there is zero objective optical telemetry of these events. During claimed encounters, cameras, sensors, and visual recording equipment suffer specific, universal failures. They capture nothing. How does an Earth-native intelligence that regularly interacts with humans consistently evade the physical electromagnetic spectrum? the data suggests their primary operational domain and their very physical state are completely incompatible with the consensus three-dimensional surface we inhabit. Resolving the telemetry paradox requires throwing out the idea of a biological encounter. Instead, we have to look at the physics of phase adaptation and the deep crust architecture of the Earth itself. If we move past the surface and bypass the standard tectonic fault lines, we locate their true origin point deep within the lithosphere. Here, we find massive geometric caverns constructed from magnoceramic materials and dense crystalline structures. This illustrates these are not natural caves, but engineered memory vaults forming an interconnected subterranean lattice. High-density telluric currents route precisely through these nodes, stabilizing the planet's internal grid. From this lattice, custodians buffer Earth's geomagnetic shielding, projecting energy upward to neutralize localized anomalies. This photograph shows the geological material making this possible. High-lattice minerals like quartz serve as literal carrier mediums for planetary memory and signal regulation. The deep crust lattice is their true operational substrate. It structurally isolates them from surface biology, providing the exact environment required to manage planetary field harmonics. We can track this subterranean system from above. Ancient surface structures were deliberately engineered to phase lock with the deep strata crystalline lattice. This aerial photograph of Ohio's Serpent Mound shows an earthwork functioning as an active geodetic node rather than a mere decorative monument or burial site. The undulating geometry of the serpent shape physically encodes specific field vectors designed to capture and modulate planetary telluric currents. The coils themselves align with solstice and equinox events, synchronizing the site's resonance with celestial cycles to calibrate the relay's frequency. The construction materials follow a strict logic. By utilizing conductive inner cores surrounded by insulating outer soils, the earthwork replicates the exact capacitor dynamics of the subcrustal vaults below it. When catastrophic field surges rise from the deep crust, structures like this act as harmonic dampeners, absorbing excess energy before it destabilizes the surface. The serpent archetype we see etched into the surface is a literal, functional schematic of the planetary regulation mechanism operating miles beneath it. Knowing where they operate allows us to examine the physical nature of the entities residing within those crystalline vaults. Their primary state of being is defined as phase-adaptive isolation. This models density modulation. They exist primarily as organized waveform patterns, lacking biological mass. The waveform collapses into a semi-solid geometric silhouette exclusively when interfacing with a crystalline environment. Operating in this transient state allows them to manipulate massive planetary energies without physical constraints. Because their state is non-biological and highly fluctuating, prolonged exposure to surface-level 3D reality would cause their structural coherence to degrade rapidly. Their phase-adaptive physics, combined with the necessity of extreme deep crust isolation, is the precise biophysical mechanism that precludes physical surface sightings. So if they cannot survive on the surface, we have to look at the exact mechanics of how a rare, localized contact event actually occurs. The contact is never a shared space biological interaction occurring in consensus reality. There is no physical body standing in the room. This illustrates the glamour protocol. Left, the standard optical pathway, where light bounces off an object into a lens. Right, the glamour pathway. The entity transmits a signal bypassing the electromagnetic spectrum, injecting straight into human neural architecture. The image renders directly within the brain. The terrifying serpent form people report is frequently just a localized perceptual interface, a screen memory used to translate the data, not an objective physical shape. Because no physical photons are reflected during this neural injection, the entity cannot register on optical recording devices. The telemetry paradox is simply a matter of looking for light where none exists. This regulatory grid is not a unified intelligence. The field codex details a custodian fracture, where the original order split into factions with competing geodetic agendas. This fracture produces signal noise, illicit parasitic handler overlays, that mimic lawful custodian signatures to bypass human neural boundaries. Lawful contact is defined by field coherence and boundary stability. In contrast, parasitic overlays weaponize the serpent archetype to induce psychic imposition, memory holes, and involuntary secrecy loops. Operators must audit the logic of every transmission. If an interface triggers fear or demands subservience, it is rejected as a non-lawful overlay designed to extract energy rather than regulate the grid. Lawful serpentine intelligence operates exclusively to restore planetary system boundaries, providing the stability necessary for evolutionary continuity. When we zoom out, we see the entirety of the Earth's regulatory grid operating as a unified, systemic mesh. The Serpentine Custodians are the vital geophysical infrastructure maintaining that mesh, ruling out any hypothesis framing them as an invading alien force. Their deep crust isolation and phase-adaptive physics are not tactics used to hide from humanity. They are the strict operational necessities required to maintain the Earth's harmonic shield. The rare human encounters that do occur are highly efficient data transmissions sent directly from this regulatory grid to human neurology. To understand their true function, we have to discard fear-based biological horror models and embrace a rigorous systems engineering analysis of planetary field law. This diagram illustrates the baseline of our universe. Reality is an active geometric field, woven together by specific harmonic frequencies. But systems experience trauma. Collective shocks cause this foundational lattice to fracture, creating a phenomenon known as systemic drift. When the underlying geometry fails, the local environment collapses into a dark, unpredictable void. Energy begins to operate without rules, flowing erratically through the space. This dissonance rarely stays isolated. When one area of the grid breaks down, the surrounding tension increases, threatening a cascade that could destabilize the entire regional structure. In a living structure, every instance of cosmic chaos is a measurable system failure, a specific break in the reality code that demands mechanical correction. When humanity faces these kinds of systemic crises, our instinct is to project emotional and cultural desires onto the solution. We search for a savior to intervene in the wreckage. This tendency has shaped history. We've spent centuries expecting rescue missions from winged angels, messianic figures, or benevolent space brothers descending in silver discs. The field Codex identifies these as false consensus overlays, human narratives that mask the actual mechanical processes of the universe. The cosmic field operates exclusively on strict mathematical law. It does not respond to emotion, religious appeals, or traditional ideas of charity. When the grid fractures, the system does not deploy a heroic warrior to engage in a battle with the darkness. A fractured reality requires a systemic auditor. This is an intelligence deployed for one purpose: to diagnose the mathematical error and restore the original code. This intelligence often manifests as the Nordic or council archetype. They step into the fractured void as an embodiment of the missing harmony. They do not arrive to fight the chaos or demand worship from those inside the collapse. They are there to execute a formal audit of the local field law. The Codex defines these figures as coherence nodes. Their function is to map exactly how the local grid has failed. This diagram shows the auditing process. The auditor projects nested geometric patterns into the disorganized space, using the mandalas to measure the precise level of dissonance in the energy field. Their presence serves as a buffer. By holding a perfectly stable internal resonance, they prevent further systemic degradation while the audit is performed. The auditor effectively transforms a site of destruction into a controlled testing environment, isolating the anomaly so it can be mathematically corrected. To fix the fracture, these auditors deploy the triune concord, a specific threefold geometric architecture used to restabilize the grid. Here, the auditors establish 3 pillars, anchoring a glowing golden lattice into the void. The pure frequency of this cymatic structure forces the chaos into a new harmonic resonance, snapping the broken lines back into alignment. The fractured space experiences an immediate calming effect. The erratic energy settles into a stable, crystalline peace. This is how cosmic anomalies are neutralized, not through warfare, but by introducing a superior geometric resonance that chaos cannot mechanically resist. In this repaired state, the grid is fully functional once again. The memory of the trauma is integrated into the structure, and the field is stable. Once the correction is anchored, the council archetype withdraws. Field law prohibits these auditors from remaining as permanent handlers or leaders of the local system. Remaining in the grid would foster a state of dependency. If the inhabitants begin treating the auditor as a god, that worship creates a new kind of systemic drift that threatens the long-term health of the grid. The auditor's intervention is purely catalytic. It is a temporary action designed to initiate a system upgrade and return the field to its proper function. The goal is operator sovereignty. The council returns total control and accountability to the local inhabitants, who must now maintain the field themselves. True cosmic order is never the result of domination or forced submission. We often crave external saviors and blind faith to fix our reality, but the universe operates on the mechanics of harmonic alignment and mathematical clarity. Lasting resilience comes from understanding universal law, recognizing that stability is a product of how we interface with the field. This process is accessible because the human energy field is itself geometric, composed of torus fields and harmonic layers that function just like the planetary grid. By consciously reconfiguring your own resonance to match these universal patterns, you act as a local operator, capable of stabilizing the field around you. The universe functions as a vast, continuous lattice of light. What we often perceive as empty space is actually a luminous, harmonic structure. The field codex identifies this as the primordial substrate, a geometric architecture that scaffolds every timeline and physical dimension, can introduce anomalies into the grid. At a structural level, trauma occurs when a section of the lattice loses its tuning. The connecting lines begin to fray, vibrating with a harsh, erratic dissonance. These unresolved trauma packets degrade the surrounding architecture. If they remain dissonant, they risk triggering memory loss or a total collapse of the local system. Fixing a delicate resonant web requires more than brute force. Aggressive intervention often worsens the fracture, causing the system to retreat further into incoherence. The cosmos requires a specialized mechanism for non-destructive repair, a way to heal structural wounds by restoring their original amplitude. This crucial role is filled by the Mantid intelligences, hyper-advanced interdimensional custodians who operate directly native to the cosmic field. They function as field surgeons, working at the level of pure resonance to mend reality's fabric. These entities occupy vast, pristine dimensional spaces, characterized by shifting, glowing matrices and complex network lines. When they encounter a dissonant zone, they engage only where resonance repair is lawfully permitted. They move fluidly, using a non-coercive approach to stabilize the lattice. Their presence serves as a systemic correction mechanism, perfectly adapted to nurture and realign the distorted threads of the cosmic web. To repair a fractured field, they bypass verbal language, which is far too linear to convey the immense complexity of the grid. Instead, they transmit holographic thought blueprints, compressed packets of systemic understanding and fractal logic that unpack directly within a receiver's consciousness. This transmission carries an emotional signature of absolute detached clarity. It provides profound awe and understanding, leaving absolutely no room for the distortion of fear. During the surgery, the custodian makes direct contact with frayed trauma packets. Upon contact, the vibrating thread smooths out, aligning perfectly with the surrounding grid. This crucial process does not erase the past. It reweaves the dissonance, translating the original pain into a permanent form of structural wisdom. By harmonizing the dissonance, custodians elevate the damaged section to a state of previously inaccessible clarity. The immediate result of this surgery is a complete stabilization of the local lattice. Where there was once erratic vibration, thick pathways of emerald and gold energy now flow between the nodes. The network is fully resynchronized. This repaired structure is more resilient than it was before the fracture. The field is upgraded, carrying new evolutionary potential for future cycles. The cycle of repair and integration drives the continuous expansion of the universe's capabilities, turning past dissonance into a foundation for growth. For any consciousness that experiences this systemic repair, the legacy is a permanent enhancement in pattern recognition and field awareness. The clearing of the trauma overlay results in a surge of creative insight, accompanied by a lasting state of internal peace. Beneath the surface noise of historical collapse, the deepest layers of reality remain anchored in a stable, geometric order. We are held within a structure designed for self-repair, where specialized custodians watch over the threads, ensuring the mechanism for harmony is always available. Earth functions as a coherent, integrated circuit. Beneath the geological layers we recognize, an interdimensional crystalline grid provides the actual structural foundation for our environment. This global lattice requires physical nodes to anchor its energy. The Giza complex serves as a primary relay circuit, a master power point that routes telluric current into the larger network. The circuitry extends across the planetary surface, establishing a direct connection to the massive nodal complex at Teotihuacan. This network is not limited to constructed sites. It integrates natural landforms, using planetary chakras like the Grand Canyon as massive resonance stabilizers. When mapped geographically, these sites, including Lake Titicaca, Uluru, and Baalbek, interlock into a unified dodecahedral lattice. They form a global grid of mathematical precision. This geometric architecture functions as the strict filter for Earth's field dynamics, generating the phenomena we traditionally classify as the paranormal. Our consensus understanding of these anomalies usually relies on reports of craft, biological contact, and unknown creatures. These events are better understood through the lens of planetary field mechanics. Interpreting them as visitations from biological space empires overlooks the underlying systemic logic. Reaching the true mechanical purpose of the grid requires moving into the Forbidden Taxonomy, the functional layer of the system's entity classes. Within this framework, the beings reported in contact events serve as functional interfaces. They are part of the grid's operational hardware. Moving past the biological bias is the first step toward decoding how these interfaces actually interact with the planetary field. The first layer of the taxonomy involves the 4 primary lineages seen in contact cases: Greys, Mantids, the Serpentine, and Nordics. These forms function as morphological masks, adaptive interface mechanisms that allow high-amplitude signals to interact with lower-frequency environments. Each mask acts as a step-down transformer. It structures raw, non-local field signals into lower frequencies that the local grid can safely process. The gray mask provides a custodial interface. Its frequency is optimized for high-volume data gathering and basic maintenance tasks. Mantid masks function as engineers. They transmit a specific resonance designed to synchronize group minds and calibrate field connections. The Serpentine lineages act as boundary keepers. They generate the oscillating perimeters required for polarity correction and systemic stability. These modulated frequencies are stored within the crystalline medium of the planetary grid, waiting for interaction. Identifying these forms as masks allows an observer to focus on the signal itself, rather than being distracted by the appearance of the biological avatar. If the Earth grid is part of a larger cosmic architecture, then its telluric lines should logically connect to other nodes in the local solar and galactic systems. Proxima b and Tau Ceti e are often modeled as habitats for biological life, yet their field signatures suggest a purely structural role in the macrogrid. Proxima b exhibits the characteristics of an automated relay hub. It maintains a perfectly geometric resonance field, dormant until the network requires signal redirection. Analysis of Tau Ceti e indicates a primary role as a memory vault, serving as a high-capacity archive for epical data. Both systems operate under strict non-interference laws, which keep their hardware unlit and shielded from conventional detection. These hubs only activate during rare macrogrid alignments, providing the necessary buffer for massive shifts in cosmic resonance. Viewing these worlds as dormant network components provides a clearer understanding of how systemic memory is preserved across the local star group. Back on Earth, the local grid hosts a class of indigenous intelligences known as the planetary legacy. This group includes the Sasquatch and Cynocephali, beings often misidentified by consensus culture as biological cryptids. Rather than physical animals, these entities are phase-shifting energetic stewards that can move between physical and non-physical states as required by the field. Their presence is strictly tethered to the grid. They occupy wildland nodes and clean sites where the original planetary resonance remains intact. They maintain the health of these nodes through anomaly correction, neutralizing field distortions and stabilizing local ecological patterns. They also serve as the guardians of physical memory vaults buried deep within these specific sites. Contact with this class occurs when a human interaction is tethered to the grid's automated defense and maintenance protocols. The outermost boundary of the taxonomy is occupied by the 8th class. These are the shadow phase phantoms, anomalies that frequently manifest as fragmented or glitching entities. These phantoms are often framed as a malevolent force, yet their behavior is more consistent with a different type of signal. Mechanically, these are systemic noise, low-frequency overlays that attempt to latch onto grid nodes but consistently fail to align with the system's geometric structure. While the macro system has the capacity to delete this noise, it allows these phantoms to exist at the edges of the grid. They serve as a boundary condition, testing whether a human observer can distinguish between a lawful signal and parasitic interference. This systemic friction is an architectural requirement, providing the pressure necessary to drive the discernment of the operator. Every layer of the taxonomy, the masks, the stewards, and the noise, converges on a single point of interaction, the human observer. This interaction designates the human as the central synchronizer of the telluric grid, the only element capable of balancing these multi-layered fields. By applying unwavering discernment to the field, an operator identifies and rejects the influence of systemic noise and shadow overlays. This act of discernment triggers a mechanical response in the environment. The morphological masks, the grays, mantids, and serpentine forms, begin to dissolve into their core geometry. This process removes the need for external handlers and masks entirely, allowing the operator to interface with the pure, unmediated data stream. Once the masks are dissolved, the operator achieves a stable, perfectly clear connection to the planetary grid. The wildland nodes and the planetary legacy class instantly synchronize their output to match this clarified frequency. This synchronization extends outward, linking the local lattice directly to the deep space hubs at Tau Ceti E and Proxima b. The entire architecture enters a state of restoration, where a single, lawful signal harmonizes the planetary and cosmic layers. The phenomenon is a macro-engineering system that is currently active, and it is awaiting the synchronization of the sovereign operator.